The cursor blinks. You stare at the number on the screen. Compliance attendance, 92%, and your manager's voice echoes in your skull like a recorded loop you can't stop. Just round it up to 95. Nobody gets hurt. Makes the audit cleaner. Your finger hovers over the keyboard. The break room coffee has gone cold in your hand. Fluorescent lights hum overhead, that particular frequency that makes your teeth ache if you listen too long. Outside the glass wall, your co-workers laugh about something you can't hear. The form waits. The room waits. Your soul waits. Have you ever been asked to just tweak one number to make everyone's life easier, including yours? When compromise was easier, I chose integrity. This is what integrity actually costs. Not the sanitized Sunday school version where Daniel smiles serenely while lions yawn at his feet. The real cost. The tightness in your chest when you know what's right and what's easy are standing on opposite sides of a chasm and everyone you respect is waving you toward easy. The cost is standing in a break room at 3:47 on a Thursday afternoon, alone, with a decision that feels simultaneously too small to matter and too large to survive. What I'm going to tell you is this. Integrity is costly in the moment and priceless over a lifetime. It's not one heroic stand. It's 100 micro-decisions that shape who you become when no one's watching. And today, I'll give you 4 things before we're done. A real office pressure test that mirrors an ancient furnace, the anatomy of a small compromise that becomes a soul scar, a framework to stand without self-righteousness or rage, and the unexpected peace that follows obedience, whether you win or lose. But first, let me take you back to the exact moment the ask arrived. It was 2:30 p.m. You were 3 months into a job you actually liked. Good team, decent manager, work that mattered. You'd survived the probationary gauntlet, and the permanent offer letter sat in your inbox like a promise kept. Then Marissa from HR stopped by your desk with a form you'd filled out 2 weeks prior. Employee compliance tracking, something about safety training attendance rates for the quarterly audit. You barely remembered submitting it. She leaned close, voice low enough that the cubicle walls absorbed it. Hey, quick question. This number here, she tapped the screen. It's showing 92%. Could you bump it to 95? The system rounds anyway, and it keeps us clean for the audit. No big deal. No big deal. You blinked. But the actual number is 92. She smiled. Patient. A little confused, like you'd missed an obvious social cue. Right, but the threshold is 95 to stay compliant. If we're at 92, it triggers a review. Extra paperwork for everyone. You know how audits are. She tilted her head. It's basically a rounding issue. The system's flawed. Your throat went dry. You nodded, non-committal, said you'd look at it. She left. You stared at the number. 92. True. 95. False. 3 percentage points. A rounding error. A small correction. A tiny lie. The break room at 3:47 was when it escalated. Your manager, Dale, mid-40s, kind in that distracted way busy people are kind, found you pouring coffee you didn't want. He closed the distance between you and the door. Not aggressive, just present. Marissa mentioned the form. His tone was carefully neutral. I know it seems like a small thing, but we really need that number at 95. The VP's already flagged our department. One more audit ding, and we're under review for the next fiscal year. That affects everyone's bonus. Morale. You get it. You got it. It's just... You started, then stopped. How do you say it's not true without sounding like a child who doesn't understand how the world works? Dale filled the silence. Look, I respect that you're thorough. That's good. But sometimes thoroughness becomes rigidity, you know. The number should be 95. The training system glitched last quarter, didn't log people correctly. So in a way, you're correcting a system error, not falsifying data. He put a hand on your shoulder, brief, paternal. It's the right thing to do for the team. The right thing. You said you'd think about it. He said, don't overthink it, and left. You stood there holding burnt coffee, alone, the fluorescent hum suddenly deafening. That's when the cracks started. You didn't go back to your desk right away. You walked to the bathroom, locked yourself in a stall, and sat on the closed lid trying to breathe like a normal person. Your hands shook. Not from fear exactly, from the collision of 2 realities. In one reality, this was nothing. A rounding error, office politics, survival. In the other reality, this was everything. A test, a line, A question you couldn't unknow. Am I the kind of person who bends? The problem was, you already knew the answer, because you'd bent before. Freshman year of college, philosophy paper. You were drowning in deadlines, and your roommate offered you his essay from the previous semester. Same professor, different topic, but close enough to Frankenstein. You changed the intro, tweaked some sentences, submitted it, got a B+. Felt sick for a week, but told yourself everyone did it. The professor never knew. You graduated summa cum laude with that B+ stitched into your transcript like a hidden scar. Your first job out of college, marketing firm. Your supervisor asked you to blame a missed deadline on a coworker who'd just given notice, someone leaving anyway, no harm done. You did it, sent the email. The coworker found out, confronted you in the parking lot. You mumbled an apology. They drove away. You never saw them again, but you saw yourself differently after that. These weren't catastrophic sins. No one died, no fortunes were lost. But each time you bent, a little piece of you calcified. A small hardness, a quiet cynicism that whispered, "This is how it works. This is the cost of entry. Everyone compromises. Grow up." And now, sitting in a bathroom stall at 4:02 p.m., you realized you were tired of growing up that way. The fear inventory started that night. You went home, small apartment, second floor, street noise bleeding through thin walls, and sat at your kitchen table staring at your laptop. The form glowed like an accusation. You made a list in your head, the kind of list anxiety makes when it wants to win. Immediate fears. Marissa thinks you're difficult. Dale thinks you're naive. The team resents you for making their lives harder. You become that person, the one who doesn't get how things work, who causes problems, who can't just go along. Professional fears. Your performance review is in 8 weeks. You're still in the soft probationary zone where they can let you go without cause. This could be the thing that tips the scale. Not a fireable offense, just a cultural misfit, a bad investment, someone who doesn't play ball. Financial fears. Rent is due in 12 days. Your student loan payment auto-drafts on the 15th. Your mum's supplemental insurance premium, the one you're covering because her fixed income can't, hits on the 20th. You have $1,700 in savings. If you lose this job, you have maybe 6 weeks before the freefall starts. Social fears. You just started getting invited to the Friday lunch group. People know your name now. You're not the new person anymore. You're part of the ecosystem. If you push back on this, you go back to being new. Worse, you become other, the odd one, the rigid one, the one people work around instead of with. Identity fears. Maybe you are naive. Maybe this is what integrity costs. Irrelevance. Maybe the people who succeed are the ones who learn when to bend, and the people who fail are the ones who plant flags on molehills. Maybe you're making this a moral Everest when it's actually just a speed bump, and your inability to see that is the real problem. The rationalizations came fast after that, smooth and practiced like a closing argument you'd heard before. Everyone does this. You've seen the senior managers fudge timelines, massage projections, adjust numbers to fit narratives. If they do it, if the VP probably knows, if this is standard operating procedure disguised as exception, then refusing isn't integrity, it's performative self-righteousness. The system is broken. Dale wasn't wrong. The training software did glitch last quarter. People took the courses and didn't get credit. So in a cosmic sense, 95 might be closer to the truth than 92. You're not lying. You're correcting for a flawed system. This isn't the hill to die on. Save your integrity for something that matters. This is administrative noise, a checkbox on a form no one will ever read. If you're going to stake your career on a principle, make it a principle worth the cost. You'll do better when you have more power. Right now, you're small, replaceable. If you lose this job over a compliance form, you'll have no platform to do good later. Bend now, build capital, then spend it on things that actually matter. Strategic compromise isn't betrayal, it's wisdom. Every rationalization landed like a sedative, smooth, reasonable, almost comforting. Except underneath, a quiet nausea bloomed like rot. You opened your phone, scrolled to your best friend's name, Jenna, the one who knows when you're lying even when you don't. She picked up on the second ring. "Hey, what's wrong?" You tried to laugh. "What makes you think something's wrong?" You never call after 9 unless you're spiraling. You told her, "The form, The ask, the pressure, the rationalizations. You tried to make it sound small, but your voice cracked halfway through and gave you away. Silence on the other end. Then, what do you want me to say? I don't know. That I'm overthinking it? That it doesn't matter? Do you think it doesn't matter? And there it was. The question that cut through every rationalization like a blade through silk. No, you whispered. I think it matters. Then you already know what to do. But what if I lose my job? Jenna's voice softened. Then you lose a job. But you keep yourself. And honestly, I'd rather have a broke friend who can sleep at night than a rich one who can't. You hung up, sat in the dark. Your kitchen light flickered. One of those LED bulbs that's dying slowly, pulsing like a heartbeat. And for the first time in years, you prayed. Not the polished Sunday prayer. The raw kind. The kind that sounds like desperation. God, I don't know what to do. Everyone's telling me this is fine, that I'm being ridiculous, that this is how the world works. But I can't shake the feeling that if I do this, if I change that number, I'm changing something in me I won't get back. And I'm scared. I'm so scared of losing this job, of being poor again, of disappointing people, of being alone. But I'm more scared of becoming someone I'll hate. So, if you're there, if you're real, I need you to show me what integrity actually costs. Because right now it feels like everything. No audible answer, no lightning bolt. Just the hum of the refrigerator and the flicker of a dying bulb. But underneath the fear, something else stirred. Faint. Stubborn. A voice you'd buried under years of pragmatism and self-preservation. But if not, you didn't know where the words came from. Old Sunday school memory, maybe. Daniel in the furnace. Shadrach, Meshach, Abednego standing in front of a king who could incinerate them, saying, "Our God can save us, but even if he doesn't, we won't bow. But if not," you whispered it aloud, tasted it, let it settle. Even if you lose the job, even if the team hates you, even if you end up broke and alone and proved right about nothing except your own irrelevance, even if you won't bow. You closed the laptop, didn't sign the form, not yet. You bought yourself 12 hours. The next morning came too fast. You woke to an email time-stamped 6:47 a.m. subject line. Form follow-up. From Dale, CC, Marissa and 2 directors you'd met once at onboarding. Hi, your name. Just circling back on the compliance form. Need this submitted by noon today so we can close out the quarterly audit. Thanks for your flexibility. Dale. The word flexibility sat there like a euphemism for something uglier. You sat on the edge of your bed, phone in hand, reading it 3 times. The CC list was the tell. This wasn't a request anymore. It was documentation. A paper trail that said, "We asked. We were reasonable." What happens next is on you. You showered, got dressed, drove to work in silence because even the radio felt too loud, parked in your usual spot, walked through the lobby, smiled at the security guard, badged in, took the elevator to the 3rd floor. Normal. Everything was normal, except the tightness in your chest that felt like a hand squeezing. You sat at your desk, opened your email. The form was there, patient and blinking. 92%. 3 clicks to change it to 95. 1 signature. Done. Your phone buzzed. Text from a coworker, Sam, friendly, well-meaning. "Hey, heard about the form thing. Just FYI, I've had to adjust numbers before for system errors. Super normal, don't stress it." You stared at the text. Super normal, the phrase lodged in your throat like a stone. At 10:15, you went to the break room for water you didn't need. A co-worker you barely knew, older woman, quiet, worked in a different department, was microwaving something that smelled like rosemary and regret. She glanced at you. "You okay?" You nodded too quickly. "Yeah, fine." She smiled, sad and knowing. "You don't look fine." You almost left. But something about her face, kind, weathered, familiar in a way you couldn't place, made you stop. "Can I ask you something?" Your voice came out smaller than you intended. "Sure." If someone asks you to do something that's technically small, but feels wrong, like really wrong, but everyone's saying it's fine, and you're the only one who thinks it matters, what do you do? She turned off the microwave, leaned against the counter, studied you for a long moment. You do the thing that lets you sleep at night, she said quietly. Even if it costs you. Especially if it costs you. Because the price of losing yourself is always higher than the price of losing a job. Her words hung there, clean and final. I did it the other way once, she continued, 20 years ago. Fudged some numbers to keep my boss happy. Got promoted 6 months later. And you know what? I still think about it. Still wonder who I'd be if I'd chosen differently. The promotion didn't last. But the regret did. She grabbed her lunch, squeezed your shoulder once and left. You stood there, alone in the fluorescent cold, and felt something crack open in your chest, not breaking, but breaking through. At 11:30, you made a decision. You opened a new email, subject line, compliance form clarification request, sent to HR directly, no CC. Hi, I want to ensure I'm interpreting the compliance form correctly. The current attendance data shows 92%. I've been asked to adjust this to 95% to meet the audit threshold. Before I do, can you confirm, is it standard procedure to adjust reported figures to match target thresholds, or should forms reflect actual data with a note explaining system discrepancies? I want to make sure I'm following the correct protocol. Thanks. You hit send before you could second guess. Your hands shook. You just created a paper trail of your own, one that said, I see what you're asking, and I'm asking if it's legal. At 11:52, Dale appeared at your desk. His face was carefully blank. Can we talk? Conference room. Your heart hammered. You followed. The conference room had glass walls, the kind that make every conversation feel like a fishbowl. Dale closed the door. Didn't sit. What's going on? His voice was still friendly, but the undertone had hardened. Why did you email HR? I just wanted to make sure I was doing it right. You're making this complicated. It's not complicated. I know, You forced yourself to meet his eyes. The number is 92. If I change it to 95, that's not accurate. I can add a note explaining the system error, or we can request an extension, but I can't certify something that's not true. Dale's jaw tightened. He sat down, gestured for you to do the same. Let me be very clear, he said quietly. This reflects on the whole team. On your judgment. On your future here. You've been doing great work, but cultural fit matters. And right now, you're making me question whether you understand how we operate. The unspoken threat hovered between you like smoke. You will burn for this. But underneath the fear, something else rose. A calm you didn't expect. Not peace exactly. More like clarity. You'd walked into this room afraid of losing your job. But sitting there, listening to Dale frame your integrity as a cultural deficiency, you realized you were more afraid of keeping it. More afraid of waking up in 5 years as the person who'd learned when to bend, who'd traded truth for approval so many times they couldn't remember what the difference felt like. You took a breath. I understand the pressure, I really do, but I can't sign something I know is false. I'm happy to work on an alternative, adding context, requesting an audit extension, anything that doesn't require me to certify inaccurate data, but I can't change the number. Dale stared at you. For a moment, you thought he might yell. Instead, he leaned back, exhaled slowly. You're making a mistake. Maybe. He stood. I need your decision by end of day. You have it. He left. You sat there in the glass room, visible to everyone, alone, and whispered the words that had been circling your mind since last night. But if not, be it known unto thee, O King, that we will not serve thy gods, nor worship the golden image which thou hast set up. Daniel 3:18. King James. Words written thousands of years ago by 3 men standing in front of a furnace, choosing God over survival. And in that sterile conference room, with your career likely ending and your rent payment looming and every rational voice screaming that you were throwing your life away over a compliance form, those ancient words felt like the only true thing in the room. The rest of the day moved in slow motion. You went back to your desk, opened the form, stared at it. The office buzzed around you, phones ringing, keyboards clicking, normal Thursday sounds. But you felt separate, underwater, watching your life from a distance. At 3 p.m., you added a note to the form. Attendance data reflects actual recorded completions as of date. Training system experienced logging errors in Q2. Recommend IT review or alternative reporting method if discrepancy review is needed. You typed 92 in the field. You signed your name. You hit submit. And somewhere, beneath the fear and the uncertainty and the very real possibility that you'd just ended your career over 3 percentage points, you felt it. Not triumph, not vindication, just clean, like you'd washed something off your hands you didn't know was there. A voice, soft and steady, not audible, but somehow more real than sound. Walk in. I am with you. You closed your laptop. The fire was coming. You could feel it. But for the first time in years, you weren't running from it. You were walking in. The silence after submission felt like the pause between lightning and thunder. You know the sound is coming. You just don't know how loud it will be. You left work at 5:03 p.m., 2 minutes after everyone else started their weekend small talk about brunch plans and Netflix queues. No one said goodbye. You didn't expect them to. Word travels fast in open-plan offices, and by 3:30, your act of digital disobedience had made the rounds. You'd become interesting in the worst possible way. Not the person who brought donuts or told good jokes, but the person who'd made things difficult. The drive home stretched longer than usual. Every red light felt like an interrogation. What did you just do? Do you understand what you've done? Your hands gripped the steering wheel too tight, knuckles white, jaw clenched. You turned on the radio and immediately turned it off. Silence was worse. Noise was worse. Everything was worse. You parked in your usual spot, 3rd floor of the apartment garage, under the flickering light that maintenance kept promising to fix, and sat there with the engine off, listening to the tick-tick-tick of cooling metal. Your phone buzzed. Email notification. Your stomach dropped. Subject line, Monday morning meeting request. From Dale, CC:HR Director, Department VP. Hi, your name. Let's connect first thing Monday at 8 a.m. to discuss next steps regarding your recent submission. Please confirm receipt. Dale. There it was. The sound after the lightning. Next steps. Corporate speak for we're discussing whether to keep you. You read it 3 times, trying to find a version where those words meant something other than what they obviously meant. There wasn't one. You climbed the stairs to your apartment. Elevator was broken again, had been for a week. And by the time you reached the 2nd floor landing, the numbness had started. Not the kind that feels like peace. The kind that feels like anesthesia before surgery. Your body's mercy when the pain gets too close. Inside, you dropped your bag by the door. Didn't turn on the lights. Just stood in the grey, almost dark of early evening, city noise filtering through thin walls. Someone's TV, a couple arguing in Spanish, a dog barking at nothing. You should eat. You weren't hungry. You should call someone. You didn't want to explain. You should pray. You didn't have words. Instead, you sat on the floor with your back against the couch and stared at nothing. And that's when the excavation began. Not intentional, not wanted. Just the way trauma works when you stop moving long enough for it to catch up. The memories came in fragments, non-linear, the way they do when your brain is trying to show you a pattern you've been avoiding. Age 8, Sunday school. You'd memorized the verse, John 3:16, the easy one everyone knew, but when Mrs. Patterson called on you, you froze, couldn't remember the first word. The other kids giggled. Not mean, just kids. But you felt it like a spotlight burning. And in that moment, you learned, it's safer to stay quiet than to risk being wrong. Age 14, your parents' kitchen. Your dad, good man, hard worker, loved you in the way men of his generation loved, which meant silently and through provision, was angry about something, a bill, a late fee, money stretched too thin. You'd asked if you could do choir tour that spring, the one that cost $200. He didn't yell, just looked at you with this exhausted disappointment and said, "Do you think money grows on trees?" You said no. Dropped it. Never asked for anything extra again. Learned. Your needs are a burden. Don't add weight. Age 19. College ethics class. The professor posed a dilemma. Would you lie to save a life? The class debated. You stayed silent, because you'd already learned that the right answer depends on who's grading you, and conviction without power is just noise. Learned. Moral clarity is a luxury for people who can afford consequences. Age 23. First job. The co-worker you blamed for the missed deadline. You remember their face when they confronted you in the parking lot. Not angry, just sad, confused, like they'd expected better from you. You mumbled something about pressure and deadlines, and I'm sorry it came across that way, which wasn't an apology at all, just deflection dressed up in sorry-shaped words. They drove away. You went home and told yourself it didn't matter because they were leaving anyway. Learned. Loyalty is conditional. Survival comes first. Age 26. The philosophy paper. Your roommate's essay that became yours. You'd rationalized it at the time. Everyone did it. The professor would never know. You were drowning, and this was the life raft. You got the B+. Graduated summa cum laude. But sometimes, late at night, you wondered, what grade would you have gotten if you'd written it yourself? And worse, who would you be now if you'd tried? Learned. Integrity is expensive. Shortcuts are efficient. Choose efficiency. The pattern crystallized like frost on glass, sharp and clear. Don't risk, don't burden, don't make waves, bend when pressed, survive. Every moment you thought was isolated, every small compromise, every swallowed truth, every time you chose easy over honest, they weren't isolated at all. They were data points on a trajectory. A slow, imperceptible curve away from the person you'd meant to become and toward the person survival required you to be. And now, sitting on the floor of your apartment at 29 years old, you realized the HR form wasn't the first time you'd been asked to bend. It was just the first time you'd been awake enough to notice. Your phone rang. Not a text. An actual call. You glanced at the screen. Mom. You almost didn't answer, didn't have the energy to perform okayness. But guilt, the inherited kind, the kind that says good children answer their mother's calls, won. Hey, Mom. Hi, sweetheart. Just checking in. You sound tired. Long week. A pause. Your mother had a PhD in reading subtext. What happened? You tried to summarize. The form, the ask, the refusal, the Monday meeting. You kept your voice light, factual, like you were describing someone else's life. Silence on her end. Then, are you going to be okay? The question cracked something, because she didn't ask if you did the right thing. Didn't ask if you were being stubborn. Just, are you going to be okay? I don't know, you whispered. Do you regret it? You thought about that, really thought. No, I'm terrified, but I don't regret it. Then you're already okay. Her voice softened. You sound like your grandmother. What? My mother? Your nana. She paused, choosing words carefully. She worked at a factory in the 60s. Sewing plant. They had quotas, impossible quotas, and the supervisors would tell the women to mark pieces as quality checked, even when they weren't, just to hit numbers. Everyone did it, kept their jobs, kept the line moving, but your nana refused. Said she wouldn't sign her name to a lie, even a small one. They demoted her, cut her hours, made her life hell for 6 months. You'd never heard this story. What happened? Federal inspector showed up. Random audit. Found defects in the clothing, stuff that should have been caught in quality checks. Traced it back to the falsified reports. 3 supervisors got fired. Your nana got her position back and a written apology. She laughed softly, bittersweet. She never told me this to make herself sound heroic. She told me because those 6 months almost broke her. She was a single mum. She was scared. But she said the one thing she couldn't afford to lose was her ability to look at herself in the mirror. Your throat tightened. Why didn't you ever tell me this before? Because you can't teach integrity. You can only model it and hope it takes root. She exhaled. I'm proud of you. Even if Monday goes badly, especially if it does. You hung up a few minutes later, and the numbness cracked just enough to let something else in. Not comfort exactly, but company. You weren't the first person to stand here. wouldn't be the last. Generations of people choosing hard over easy, truth over safety, and paying for it in ways that didn't make the highlight reel. That night you couldn't sleep. At 1:47 a.m., you gave up and made tea you didn't drink. Sat at your kitchen table under the warm lamplight, the only light in the apartment, small and insufficient and somehow exactly enough. You opened your Bible. Hadn't touched it in months. The binding cracked when you opened it. That particular sound of neglect. You didn't know what you were looking for. Comfort, maybe. A verse that said you did the right thing and everything will be fine. Instead, you found Daniel 3. You'd known the story since childhood. Shadrach, Meshach, Abednego, the fiery furnace, the Sunday school flannel graph with cartoon flames and smiling men who didn't look remotely afraid. But reading it now, at 29, unemployed adjacent, terrified and awake at 2 a.m., it hit different. Daniel 3:13-15. Nebuchadnezzar, furious, gives them one more chance. I'll give you another opportunity. When you hear the music, bow. If you don't, you'll be thrown into the furnace. And what God can deliver you then? One more chance. A last opportunity to comply quietly. Avoid the spectacle. Keep your head down and your job secure. You thought about Monday's meeting, the HR director, the VP. They'd give you one more chance too. Resubmit the form, adjust the number. We'll forget this happened. Cultural fit restored. Crisis averted. Daniel 3:16-18. O Nebuchadnezzar, we are not careful to answer thee in this matter. If it be so, our God whom we serve is able to deliver us from the burning fiery furnace, and he will deliver us out of thine hand, O king. But if not, be it known unto thee, O king, that we will not serve thy gods, nor worship the golden image which thou hast set up. But if not, 3 words that changed everything, not because God will save us, but even if he doesn't. Their obedience wasn't conditional on rescue, wasn't a negotiation. We'll obey if you deliver. It was a statement of identity. This is who we are. Outcome be damned. You read it again and again. Let the King James syntax wash over you, ancient and formal and somehow more true for its strangeness. We are not careful to answer thee in this matter. Not careful, not anxious, not scrambling to justify, not defensive. They didn't explain themselves to death, didn't try to win the argument, just stated their position and let it stand. But if not, a voice, not audible, not external, but more real than sound, settled into the quiet of your kitchen like a presence you'd forgotten was always there. If truth costs you everything, I will cover you, but if you trade it, I cannot restore what you willingly sold. You closed the Bible, sat in the lamplight, let the tears come, not the loud kind, just the silent overflow of something too big to hold, because here's what you'd been avoiding. You were angry. Not at Dale or Marissa or the VP, at yourself. Angry that you'd bent before. Angry that it took 29 years and a compliance form to realize you'd been slowly becoming someone you didn't respect. Angry that integrity had been optional for so long that choosing it now felt revolutionary instead of baseline. And underneath the anger, grief. Grief for the person you could have been if you'd stood earlier. Grief for the compromises you couldn't undo. Grief for the version of yourself who thought bending was wisdom when it was just cowardice with a nicer name. But also, and this part surprised you, hope. Because if you could see it now, maybe it wasn't too late. Maybe becoming who you were meant to be wasn't about erasing the past, but refusing to repeat it. Maybe integrity wasn't perfection, but direction. 1,000 small choices to turn toward truth even when it cost you, especially when it cost you. Saturday came, then Sunday. You didn't go to church, couldn't face the small talk, the how are you questions that required lies or explanations. Instead, you stayed home and did something you hadn't done in years. You wrote, not for anyone else, just for you. You wrote about the philosophy paper, the blamed co-worker, the moments you'd bent, and the moments you wished you'd stood. You wrote about your nana, the sewing plant, the 6 months of hell she endured for a principle that seemed small until it wasn't. You wrote about Daniel's friends and the furnace and the but, if not, that refused to make obedience contingent on outcome. And you wrote about Monday. I don't know what will happen. I might lose my job. I might end up broke. I might prove everyone right who said I was naive and rigid and didn't understand how the world works. But I know this. I can't build a life on lies, even small ones. I can't become someone I'm afraid to be alone with. And if the cost of keeping my job is losing myself, then the job is already gone. I just haven't admitted it yet. You read it back, let it settle. Then you did something strange. You prayed the prayer you'd been avoiding. Not the please fix this prayer, not the make them see I'm right prayer, the surrender prayer. God, I don't know what Monday holds. I don't know if you're going to rescue me or let me burn. But I'm asking, begging, for the courage to walk in anyway, to stand without rage, to speak truth without self-righteousness, to trust that even if I lose everything, you're still good, and I'm still yours. And if this furnace is where you refine me, fine. But don't let me bend. Please. Whatever it costs. Don't let me bend. Monday morning arrived like a sentencing. You woke at 5:30, couldn't go back to sleep. Showered. Put on the clothes that felt like armor. Professional. Composed. The version of yourself that could sit in a conference room and not fall apart. You arrived at the office at 7:45, 15 minutes early. The building was quiet. Just the hum of HVAC and the distant sound of a vacuum on another floor. You sat in your car and whispered it one more time. But if not, we will not serve thy gods, nor worship the golden image which thou hast set up. Your phone buzzed. Text from Jenna. Praying for you. You've got this. And if you don't, you've still got you. You walked in. The conference room was the same one from Thursday. Glass walls, fluorescent cold. Dale was already there. So was the HR director, a woman named Patricia, 50s, kind eyes, unreadable face. And the VP, Marcus, who you'd met exactly once during onboarding and who'd smiled and said welcome aboard and promptly forgot your name. They all stood when you entered, gestured to a chair. You sat. Patricia spoke first, voice carefully neutral. Thank you for meeting with us. We wanted to discuss your recent form submission and the concerns you raised. You nodded, didn't speak, remembered, we are not careful to answer thee in this matter. Dale leaned forward. Look, I think there's been a misunderstanding. The request to adjust the compliance number wasn't about falsifying data. It was about correcting a known system error. But your email to HR raised some flags that we need to address. What flags? Your voice came out steadier than you felt. Patricia glanced at a folder in front of her. Your email questioned whether adjusting figures to meet audit thresholds was standard procedure. That language implied you felt you were being asked to do something unethical. I was being asked to certify a number I knew wasn't accurate. Even if the inaccuracy was due to a system glitch, Marcus, the VP, spoke for the first time. His tone wasn't hostile, more genuinely confused, like he couldn't fathom why this was a problem. Yes. You met his eyes. Because my signature means I verified the data. If the data is wrong, my signature is a lie. Even if the reason it's wrong is a system error, I can't certify it as true. Silence. Dale's jaw tightened. Patricia made a note. Marcus leaned back, studying you like you were a puzzle he hadn't encountered before. So, what would you suggest? Patricia asked. You'd prepared for this. Add a note explaining the system error. Request an IT audit of the training software. Submit the actual data with context. Give the auditors the full picture instead of a number that looks clean but isn't accurate. That triggers a review, Dale said flatly, which delays the audit, which affects our department rating. I understand, but it's the truth. Another silence. Longer this time. Marcus exchanged a look with Patricia, some unspoken conversation you weren't privy to. Then Patricia closed her folder. We'll need to discuss this internally and get back to you. In the meantime, you're not to resubmit the form or communicate with external auditors. Understood? Understood. You can go. You stood, walked out, and as you left, glass walls on all sides, your co-workers pretending not to watch, you felt it again. Not vindication, not relief, just the quiet, steady knowledge that you'd told the truth and let it stand, and whatever came next, you could meet it without shame. The furnace was heating, but you'd walked in, and somewhere, beneath the fear, Beneath the uncertainty, beneath the very real possibility that you'd just ended your career, a voice whispered, "I am with you in the fire. You are not alone. You have never been alone." The rest of Monday dissolved into a fog of productivity theatre. Emails you pretended to read, tasks you pretended to complete, normalcy you pretended to feel. Your co-workers gave you space, the kind that feels less like respect and more like quarantine. By 3 p.m., you'd received exactly 3 interactions. A nod from the receptionist, a tight smile from Sam, and a Slack message from your team lead reassigning your current project to someone else. Just temporarily, until things get sorted out. The subtext hung there like smoke, until we decide if you're staying. You left at 5 o'clock sharp, didn't linger, didn't make small talk, just walked to your car under a sky that had turned that particular shade of grey that comes before rain but never delivers it. Heavy, expectant, stuck. Home felt smaller than usual, the walls closer. You microwaved something you didn't taste, scrolled your phone without seeing it, tried to watch TV but the laugh track felt obscene. Everything felt obscene. The casual normalcy of the world continuing while yours hung in suspension. At 9:17 p.m., you did what you'd been avoiding all day. You let yourself feel it. Not the sanitized version. Not the brave narrative you'd tell later if this turned out okay. The raw, unfiltered terror of free fall. What if I lose everything? The question wasn't hypothetical anymore. It was a genuine possibility, maybe even a probability, and sitting alone in your apartment with the rent due in 9 days and your savings account hovering just above 4 digits. The math was simple and devastating. Lose the job. Burn through savings in 6 weeks, maybe 8 if you ate ramen and cancelled subscriptions. Start applying everywhere, anywhere, and hope someone hired you before the eviction notice came. Move back in with your parents at 29, the room you grew up in waiting like a monument to failure. Start over, but not the inspiring kind. The kind where people ask what happened and you have to explain that you lost your job over a compliance form, and watch their faces do the mental calculation. Worth it. The fear metastasized. What if your Nana's story was the exception, not the rule? What if integrity didn't always lead to vindication? What if you were just naive, a child playing at principles in an adult world that ran on compromise? What if God didn't show up? The thought landed like blasphemy, but once it arrived, you couldn't unfeel it. You'd prayed. You'd stood. You'd done the Sunday school answer, choose God, trust God, obey God. But what if obedience led to poverty? What if the furnace wasn't where God showed up? What if it was just where you burned? But if not sounded noble in a Bible story, it sounded insane in a second-floor apartment with medical bills and student loans and a future that suddenly looked like a cliff edge. You stood up, paced, sat back down, tried to pray and couldn't, tried to read scripture and the words slid off your brain like water off glass. Everything inside you was static, white noise, the spiritual equivalent of a dial tone. And then, because sometimes God meets us in the fury instead of the peace, you got angry. Not polite anger, not the kind you dress up in theological language, the Jacob wrestling kind, the kind that doesn't let go until it gets an answer. You stood in your kitchen, 2:34 a.m. now, the city silent outside. Just you and the hum of the refrigerator and the presence you couldn't see but could feel pressing in. And you said it out loud. "Where are you?" Your voice cracked. You didn't care. "I did what you wanted. I stood. I told the truth. I walked into the fire like Daniel's friends, like every Sunday school story said to do. And now I'm here, alone, terrified, probably about to lose everything, and you're silent." The room absorbed your words, gave nothing back. You kept going, the dam breaking. "I don't want to be brave anymore. I don't want to be a testimony. I want my life back. I want the easy version where I just change the stupid number and keep my job and no one gets hurt. I want to not be the person everyone thinks is difficult and rigid and doesn't understand how things work. I'm tired. I'm so tired of doing the right thing and having it feel like punishment." Silence. And if this is some test, if you're watching to see if I'll bend, then just tell me what you want. Because I don't know how to do this. I don't know how to stand when standing costs everything. I don't know how to trust you when you feel absent. I don't know how to be okay with losing if that's what obedience means. Your breathing was ragged. Tears on your face you didn't remember starting. "I need you to show up. Not in some abstract, I'm always with you. Way. Here. Now. In this kitchen at 2 a.m., when I can't afford rent and everyone thinks I'm insane. I need... Your voice broke completely. I need to know this matters. That I matter. That standing for truth isn't just cosmic theatre where I lose and you get glory. I need... You sank to the floor, back against the cabinet, and whispered the thing you'd been afraid to say. I need to know you're real. The silence that followed wasn't empty. It was full, heavy, alive, the way air gets thick before a storm. And in that fullness, something shifted. Not a voice exactly, not audible, but a presence so clear it was louder than sound, settling into the quiet of your kitchen like a hand on your shoulder you couldn't see but absolutely felt. And then, soft, intimate, the way a parent speaks to a child who's finally stopped performing, the whisper came, "Do you think I brought you this far to abandon you now?" You froze. Breath caught. Every moment you thought you were alone, the conference room, the break room, the night you sat at this table deciding I was there, not distant, not watching from heaven like a spectator. Here, in it, with you. The tears came harder. You asked if this matters. Child, this is the only thing that matters. Not the job, not the approval, not even the outcome. This, you, choosing me when choosing me costs you. Do you know how rare that is? Do you know how precious? You shook your head, couldn't speak. I didn't call you to easy. I called you to mine. And mine means I don't leave. Not when the fire heats. Not when the outcome is unclear. Not when everyone else walks away. I stay. I have always stayed. You don't know how long you sat there. Minutes. Hours. Time felt irrelevant. But when you finally stood, legs shaky, face wet, chest aching in that good way that comes after the poison drains, you felt different. Not fixed, not suddenly fearless, but held, like you'd been fighting alone and just realized you never were. You opened your Bible again, hands still trembling. Turned to Daniel 3 and read it differently this time, not as a story about rescue, but about presence. Verse 25, he answered and said, "Lo, I see 4 men loose, walking in the midst of the fire, and they have no hurt, and the form of the 4th is like the Son of God." 4 men, not 3. God didn't prevent the furnace. He entered it. Didn't stop them from being thrown in, walked in with them, and suddenly the whole narrative shifted. This wasn't a story about avoiding consequences. It was about company in the middle of them. The form of the 4th is like the Son of God. You whispered it aloud, tasted the King James poetry. The form of the 4th. He was there, in the fire, not preventing it, transforming it, turning the place of punishment into the place of revelation, the moment of isolation into the moment of deepest companionship. You read further, verse 27, "And the princes, governors, and captains, and the king's counselors, being gathered together, saw these men, upon whose bodies the fire had no power, nor was an hair of their head singed, neither were their coats changed, nor the smell of fire had passed on them." No smell of fire. They walked through the furnace and came out unmarked. Not unscathed, they'd been in the fire, they'd felt the heat, but not defined by it. The fire didn't change them, didn't leave its signature. They were who they were before, only more so. And you realized that's what you were afraid of. Not the fire itself, but what it would leave on you. The bitterness, the cynicism, the hardness that comes from being burned. But what if the fire couldn't mark you because you weren't walking through it alone? What if the 4th man in the flames was the difference between being consumed and being refined? "I will not let the fire change who you are," the whisper came again. "I will only let it reveal it." Wednesday came. No word from HR, no email from Dale. Just silence, the corporate kind, where decisions are being made in rooms you're not invited to, and your fate is a line item on someone's agenda. You went to work. Did your job, or what was left of it. Answered emails, attended meetings where you were suddenly optional. Smiled when people made eye contact, which was rare. Lunchtime, you sat alone in your car and ate a sandwich you'd made that morning. Checked your phone, nothing. And then, unexpected, a knock on your window. You looked up, the older woman from the break room. The one who'd told you about losing herself 20 years ago. You rolled down the window. "Can I join you?" she asked. You nodded. She walked around, slid into the passenger seat. For a moment, neither of you spoke. Then she said quietly, "I heard about Monday." Your stomach tightened. "Yeah? I also heard what you said, about not being able to certify something you knew was wrong." She turned to look at you. "I want you to know, you're not alone in this." "Feels pretty alone." She smiled, sad and knowing. "I know. But here's the thing about standing for truth. It draws truth-tellers out of hiding. You just can't always see them until you've stood first." She reached into her bag, pulled out a small piece of paper, handed it to you. It was a printout, an email thread. Between her and Patricia from HR, dated yesterday. You scanned it. Your eyes caught phrases, raises important questions about our audit practices, recommend policy review, employee showed integrity we should encourage, not punish. You looked up, speechless. "I sent that Monday afternoon," she said, "after I heard about your meeting. I've been here 19 years. I have some credibility. Thought I'd use it." "Why would you?" "Because you did what I didn't. And maybe if I can make it cost you a little less, that's how I make it right." She squeezed your hand once. "You're going to be okay. I don't know what okay looks like yet, but you're going to be okay." She left. You sat there holding the paper, and for the first time since Thursday, you felt it. Not rescue, not yet, but the fourth man, walking beside you in the fire. Thursday afternoon, 4:47 p.m. Your phone rang. Patricia from HR. "Can you come to my office?" Your heart stopped. "Now? If you're available." You walked across the building on legs that didn't feel attached to your body. Every step a small prayer. "I am not alone, I am not alone, I am not alone." Patricia's office was small, organized, smelled like lavender and old paper. She gestured to a chair. You sat. She folded her hands. "I've reviewed your form submission and the concerns you raised. I've also reviewed our audit compliance policies and spoken with our legal team." You couldn't breathe. "Here's what I found. You were right." The room tilted. "Our policy explicitly states that submitted data must reflect actual figures, with notes for discrepancies. The request to adjust your number before submission violated that policy. The system error should have triggered an IT audit, not a data correction." She slid a paper across the desk. Official letterhead, your name at the top. "This is a formal acknowledgement that your submission was accurate and policy compliant. I'm also initiating a review of our audit preparation practices to ensure this doesn't happen again." You stared at the paper, read it twice, couldn't process. "What about?" Your voice cracked. "What about my job?" Patricia's face softened. "Your job is secure. In fact, I'd say your judgment has been validated. We need people who care about accuracy. And Dale and I will be having a separate conversation about appropriate requests and policy adherence." You sat there, paper in hand, and felt something crack open in your chest, not breaking, but breaking free, not triumph, not, "I told you so," just awe, because you'd walked into the fire, and the fire had no power. That night, you sat at your kitchen table under the warm lamplight and opened your Bible to Daniel 3 one more time. Verse 28. "Then Nebuchadnezzar spake and said, Blessed be the God of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, who hath sent his angel, and delivered his servants that trusted in him, and have changed the king's word and yielded their bodies, that they might not serve nor worship any god except their own God." The pagan king blessed their God. Their obedience became a testimony that shifted the room. You thought about Patricia's email, the policy review, the quiet woman who'd spent 19 years regretting her compromise and spent one afternoon making sure you didn't have to carry the same weight. You hadn't preached, hadn't Bible thumped, just refused to lie. And people noticed. Verse 30. "Then the king promoted Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego in the province of Babylon." You didn't know what your promotion looked like yet. Maybe it was keeping your job. Maybe it was something deeper. the ability to look in the mirror without flinching, the peace that comes from knowing you'd been tested and hadn't bent. Either way, you were different than you were a week ago. Not perfect, not suddenly fearless, but faithful. And faith, real faith, the kind forged in furnaces, changes everything. But if not, you whispered into the quiet. And this time the words didn't taste like terror, they tasted like freedom. Because you'd learned the secret Daniel's friends knew. Obedience isn't contingent on outcome. You obey because he is worthy, outcome be damned. And when you obey, when you walk into the fire because truth matters more than safety, he walks in with you, not always preventing the flames, but always present in them. The fourth man in the fire, the one who makes the unbearable bearable, the one who ensures the fire reveals you instead of destroying you. You closed your Bible, sat in the lamplight. Let the gratitude wash over you, not for the rescue, though you were grateful for that. For the revelation that you were never alone, that he was always there, that the furnace wasn't punishment, it was invitation. To know him not as distant deity, but as present companion. To discover that the place you feared most was the place he met you most fully. And somewhere, in the quiet of your kitchen, you heard it one more time. I told you I would cover you. I told you the fire had no power. Do you believe me now? You nodded, tears streaming. Yes, you whispered. I believe you. Then rise. There is more ahead, but you will not walk it alone. The days after Patricia's office blurred together in the strange way that relief feels when you've been holding your breath so long you forgot what normal breathing was like. You went to work, did your job, your actual job, not the provisional ghost version you'd been assigned during the limbo. Your project got reassigned back to you with a brief Slack message from your team lead. Looking forward to your input on this. No apology, no acknowledgement. Just forward motion, the corporate equivalent of pretending the awkwardness never happened. But you were different now. And different meant you noticed things you'd been trained to ignore. Friday afternoon, you were in the break room, same break room where this whole thing started, pouring coffee that was slightly less burnt than usual, and Dale walked in. Your body tensed automatically, muscle memory from a week of being a problem he needed to solve. He nodded. Hey! Hey. Silence. The coffee pot gurgled. Then, quietly, almost like he was talking to himself. Patricia told me the policy. I didn't know. I genuinely thought we were just correcting a system error. He met your eyes, and you saw something there you hadn't expected. Not hostility, but discomfort. The specific kind that comes when you realize you've been wrong and have to decide whether to admit it or defend it. For what it's worth, you were right. It wasn't an apology, but it was close enough to cost him something. Thank you for saying that, you said. He nodded again, grabbed a packet of sugar he didn't need, and left. And standing there alone with your mediocre coffee, you felt something shift. Not vindication, not even satisfaction. More like clarity. Because a week ago, you would have needed his validation, would have craved his approval, would have measured your worth by whether he thought you understood how things work. But now you knew something he didn't. How things work and how things should work aren't the same thing. And choosing the latter, even when it costs you, builds something in you the former never can. Integrity, not the bumper sticker kind. The foundational kind. The kind that holds weight when everything else collapses. That weekend, you did something you hadn't done in years. You went through old journals. Not because you were nostalgic, because you were curious. The fire had burned something away, some fog you'd been living in, and now you could see your own life differently. Like an archaeologist brushing dust off artifacts and suddenly recognizing the pattern. You found the journal from college. Flipped to the entry from the week you submitted the plagiarized philosophy paper. Turned in the ethics essay today. Used Jake's paper as a template. Let's be honest, I basically copied it. Feel weird about it, but also relieved. One less thing to stress about. Professor will never know. And honestly, everyone does stuff like this. It's not like I'm hurting anyone. I'll do better next time when I'm not drowning. You stared at that last line. I'll do better next time. Next time never came. Because compromise doesn't teach you how to stand, it teaches you how to justify, and every justification builds a little track in your brain, a neural pathway that says, bending is fine, everyone does it, you'll be stronger later. Except later never comes, you just get better at bending. You flipped further back. High school journal, an entry from the week after your dad shut down your choir tour request. Asked Dad about the spring tour today. He looked so tired when I brought it up. I felt bad for even asking. I'm not going to ask for anything else this year. It's not fair to add more pressure when they're already struggling. I need to be less of a burden. Reading it now, 15 years later, you felt something crack in your chest, because that 14-year-old wasn't being noble. She was learning that her needs were negotiable, that wanting things made her a burden, that the safest way to be loved was to need nothing. And that lesson, absorbed at 14, reinforced at 19, perfected by 29, had shaped everything. The jobs you took because they were safe instead of meaningful. The relationships where you shrank yourself to fit. The 100 small moments where you swallowed your truth because speaking it might inconvenience someone. Even the HR form, the reason you almost bent wasn't just fear of consequences. It was deeper, a bone-deep belief that your integrity mattered less than other people's comfort. But God had used a compliance form and a break-room conversation to excavate something you'd buried so deep you forgot it was there. Your voice matters. Your truth matters. You are not a burden for having a backbone. You thought about Nana, the sewing plant. 6 months of hell. Your mum had framed it as a victory, federal inspection, vindication, written apology. But sitting in your apartment now, you wondered about the 6 months in between. The days Nana went to work and got the cold shoulder. The bills that piled up when her hours got cut. The nights she lay awake wondering if she'd made a catastrophic mistake. Those months weren't in the highlight reel, but they were the story. The real story. And she'd walked through them not because she knew rescue was coming, but because she'd decided who she was. I will not sign my name to a lie, and that decision was more foundational than the outcome. Your phone rang. Mom. Hey, sweetheart. Just checking in. How's work? You told her. Patricia's meeting. The policy validation. Dale's non-apology apology. The quiet return to normal that didn't feel normal at all because you'd changed. She was quiet for a moment. Then, your Nana would be proud of you. Your throat tightened. I keep thinking about her. Those 6 months. They were hard, your mum said softly. I was 10. I remember her crying in the bathroom so I wouldn't see. Remember her taking on weekend work cleaning houses because the factory hours weren't enough. She lost weight, got quieter. A pause. But she also got solid. Like something in her settled. Even when things were falling apart, she had this peace I didn't understand until I was older. What kind of peace? The kind that comes from knowing you didn't betray yourself. She used to say, I can survive poverty. I can't survive being someone I'm ashamed of. You closed your eyes, felt the tears coming. She's why I told you that story, your mom continued. Not because it had a happy ending, though it did, but because she taught me that some things matter more than outcomes. And you, her voice cracked, you learned that without anyone having to teach you. You just knew. I almost didn't, you whispered. I almost changed the number. But you didn't. That's what matters. That night you couldn't sleep again, but this time, not from anxiety, from awareness. You lay in bed staring at the ceiling and your whole life played back like a film reel, except now you could see what you'd missed before. The fingerprints. The college roommate who offered you the essay. What if you'd said no? Who would you be now? What doors would have opened because you'd built a foundation of integrity instead of one with a crack in it? The co-worker you blamed. What if you'd taken responsibility? What if you'd been known as someone who owned their mistakes instead of deflected them? What kind of relationships would you have built? The moments you stayed silent when you should have spoken, the times you shrank when you should have stood, the pattern of bending that had been so gradual you didn't notice until a compliance form forced you to look, but also, the moments God had been preparing you. The Sunday school class where you froze, that taught you empathy for people who are afraid to speak. Your dad's exhaustion over money. that taught you the weight of financial fear, so when you faced it yourself, you recognized it and didn't let it make your decisions. The philosophy paper that taught you what compromise tastes like, so years later, when the stakes were higher, you remembered the aftertaste and chose differently. Even the blamed co-worker, even the plagiarized essay, even the shame. God had been using it all, not causing it, redeeming it. Taking the moments you thought disqualified you and turning them into the exact preparation you needed to stand when standing mattered. You sat up, turned on the lamp, opened your Bible to Daniel 3 one more time, but this time you read past the furnace to the aftermath. Verse 29. Therefore I make a decree that every people, nation, and language which speak anything amiss against the God of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego shall be cut in pieces, and their houses shall be made a dunghill, because there is no other God that can deliver after this sort. Nebuchadnezzar, pagan king, architect of their suffering, became their defender. Not because they argued, not because they preached, because they stood, and their standing revealed a God worth standing for. You thought about Patricia, the policy review, the quiet woman from the break room who'd sent that email, the shifting culture that might come from one person refusing to bend. You hadn't set out to change anything. You'd just tried to keep your integrity intact. But faithfulness is never just personal, it ripples. A memory surfaced, unbidden. 3 years ago. Different job. You'd watched a colleague, Sarah, kind woman, single mum, get blamed for a project failure that wasn't her fault. You knew the truth. The actual person responsible sat 3 desks away and said nothing. And you? You stayed silent. Told yourself it wasn't your business, that speaking up would make you a target, that Sarah would be fine. Sarah got fired 2 weeks later. You'd thought about her occasionally over the years, vague guilt, quickly buried. But now, lying in bed at 1 a.m. with the lamplight pooling warm and the city quiet outside, you let yourself really feel it. What if you'd spoken up? What if one person in that office had said, "That's not true, here's what actually happened. Maybe Sarah keeps her job. Maybe the real culprit faces consequences. Maybe, and this was the part that hurt, maybe you become the kind of person who stands for others, not just yourself." But you'd been silent, and Sarah paid the price for your cowardice. The grief that rose was sharp and clean, not the muddy kind that spirals into self-hatred, but the clarifying kind that says, "I see what I did. I own it. I'm different now." You whispered into the quiet, "I'm sorry, Sarah, wherever you are. I'm sorry I didn't stand for you." And then, softer, "God, help me never stay silent like that again. Help me be the person who speaks when it costs something, who stands for people who can't stand for themselves. Let this furnace make me that." The whisper came. Familiar now, intimate, the presence you'd learned to recognize. "This is why I let you walk through the fire. Not to punish you, to refine you, to burn away the parts of you that stayed silent and forge something new. A voice that speaks truth, a spine that doesn't bend, a heart that values people over comfort." Sunday morning, you went to church for the first time in a month. Slipped in late, sat in the back, tried to be invisible. But during worship, some old hymn you'd sung 1,000 times, a line caught you. "When through fiery trials thy pathway shall lie, my grace, all sufficient, shall be thy supply." You'd sung it before, but you'd never known it before. Grace wasn't the absence of the trial. Grace was the sufficiency in it. The fourth man in the flames. The voice at 2 a.m. when you wrestled. The woman in the break room who stood with you. The policy that vindicated you. The mom who told you about Nana. The friend who texted, "You've got this." All of it. Grace, not preventing the fire, sustaining you through it. And suddenly, standing in the back row of a church you'd been avoiding, tears streaming down your face while everyone else sang like it was just another Sunday. You felt it. Gratitude. Not for the rescue, though yes, that too, for the fire. Because the fire was where you met him. Not as a concept, not as doctrine, as presence. The one who walks into the furnace when everyone else stands outside and watches. The one who doesn't promise to prevent your suffering but promises to inhabit it. The one who says, "I am with you," and means it so completely that the fire loses its power. After the service, you sat in your car and pulled out your phone, opened your notes app, started writing, not for anyone else, just to remember. Things I know now that I didn't know 2 weeks ago. 1. Integrity costs in the moment and compounds over a lifetime. 2. The fire doesn't mean you failed, it means you refused. 3. God doesn't always prevent the furnace, but he always enters it. 4. Obedience isn't contingent on outcome. 5. The hardest decisions shape who you become more than the easy ones. 6. You are not alone, even when it feels like you are. 7th, compromise teaches you how to bend. Integrity teaches you how to stand. 8. Sometimes the thing you fear most is the place God meets you most fully. 9. Your voice matters. Your truth matters. You are not a burden for having a backbone. 10. Faithfulness is success, even when it doesn't look like victory. You read it back, let it settle. Then added one more. 11. The smell of fire doesn't have to stay on you if you let God walk you through it. Monday came again. 1 week exactly since the meeting that had felt like a sentencing. You walked into the office different than you'd walked out of it. Not arrogant, not vindicated, just clear. Clear about who you were, clear about what you wouldn't compromise, clear about the God who'd proven himself faithful in the furnace. Your co-workers treated you normally now. Crisis forgotten, drama moved on to someone else's cubicle. But you noticed something. 3 separate people stopped by your desk that week. Sam, the one who'd texted you that fudging numbers was super normal, asked if you wanted to grab coffee. During the conversation, he admitted he'd been asked to do something similar and didn't know he could say no. You told him, you can always say no. A woman from accounting, someone you'd smiled at in passing but never really talked to, sent you an email. I heard what happened. Thank you for caring about accuracy. We need more of that here. And the quiet woman from the break room, you learned her name was Diane, invited you to lunch. Over salads neither of you really wanted, she told you more of her story. The compromise, the promotion, the 20 years of regret. And then, eyes bright. But watching you stand gave me permission to do something I should have done years ago. I reported a discrepancy I'd been covering for my manager. It's under review now. I don't know what'll happen, but I'm not carrying it anymore. You sat there, fork halfway to your mouth, stunned. You did that because of me. She smiled. I did it because of you refusing to do what I did. You reminded me who I used to be, who I still could be. Faithfulness ripples. You don't always see it. Don't always know who's watching, who's taking notes, who's waiting for permission to stand because they've been bending so long they forgot it was optional. But it ripples. One person stands, another notices, then another, then another. And slowly, so slowly you almost can't see it, the culture shifts. Not because of speeches or seminars or policy memos, because someone refused to bow, and the refusal became contagious. That night, you sat at your kitchen table under the lamplight, the same table where you'd wrestled, where you'd read Daniel 3 at 2 a.m., where God had met you in your fury and fear, and you prayed differently than you ever had before. Not asking, not begging, thanking. Thank you for the fire. I know that sounds insane, but thank you. Because I never would have known you like this if everything had been easy. I never would have discovered that you walk into furnaces, that you stand with the standing, that you're not distant or detached or disappointed. You're here, in the worst moments, in the scariest decisions, in the times I thought I was alone. You were there. You've always been there. The tears came, but they were different now. Not grief tears, not fear tears. Worship tears, the kind that come when you realize the thing you thought would destroy you actually revealed the only thing that can sustain you. And thank you for not letting me bend. For loving me enough to let it cost me. For knowing that easy would have ruined me and hard would refine me. I'm different now. I don't know all the ways yet, but I know I'm not who I was 2 weeks ago, and I know I never want to go back. You opened your Bible one last time to Daniel 3. Read the ending you'd been racing toward. Verse 30. Then the king promoted Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego in the province of Babylon. Promotion. Not despite the fire, because of it. Not around the test. through it. You didn't know what your promotion looked like yet. Maybe it was keeping your job. Maybe it was Diane's email. Maybe it was Sam asking how to say no. Maybe it was the version of yourself you saw in the mirror now, someone who'd been tested and hadn't bent. Maybe promotion wasn't a position. Maybe it was becoming who you were always meant to be. You closed the Bible, turned off the lamp, sat in the dark for a moment, city lights filtering through your window, the quiet hum of life continuing around you. And in that darkness, you heard it one last time, the whisper that had carried you through. Well done, good and faithful servant. You stood when standing cost you everything. You trusted when trust felt like foolishness. You walked into the fire because you believed I was worth it. And now you know. I am. I always have been. I always will be. The fire is over, but the faithfulness you learned there, that stays, that compounds, that becomes the foundation everything else is built on. You are mine. You have always been mine, and nothing, no furnace, no fear, no cost, can change that. But if not, the words didn't scare you anymore. They anchored you, because now you knew what they really meant. Not, I'm willing to lose. But I'm not willing to bow. Not God might not show up, but even if outcomes fail, obedience doesn't. Not I'm brave enough to face consequences, but I'm loved enough to trust the one who walks through them with me. And in your small apartment, at your scarred kitchen table, under the warm lamplight that had witnessed your breaking and your becoming, you were different, refined, unafraid, free. The fire had no power. The smell of smoke didn't stay. And the fourth man, he'd been there all along. 3 months passed. Not the dramatic kind where everything changes overnight, the ordinary kind, where days blur into weeks and you wake up one morning realizing you've been breathing differently for a while now and didn't notice when it started. Work settled into a rhythm that felt almost normal, except you weren't the same person walking those hallways anymore. The project you'd been pulled from got completed. Well, apparently, because you received a company-wide email thanking the team. Your name was listed third. No one mentioned the gap in the middle where you'd been temporarily erased. Corporate amnesia is efficient that way. But something had shifted in the ecosystem around you, subtle as a change in air pressure. The compliance audit that had triggered everything. It happened. Your accurate number, 92%, unfudged, documented with context, got reviewed. The IT department did investigate the training software glitch. Turned out 6 other departments had been adjusting their numbers for quarters. The policy Patricia initiated led to a company-wide memo about data integrity. 3 managers got formal warnings. You weren't mentioned by name, but you knew, and they knew, and that quiet knowing changed how people looked at you, not with hostility anymore, with something else. Something like respect, caution, the particular awareness that comes when someone's proven they have a line they won't cross, and you're not quite sure where yours is anymore. Tuesday morning, regular week, nothing special. You were at your desk sorting through emails when a message popped up from an address you didn't recognize, internal but not someone you'd worked with. Subject line, question about standing up. You opened it. Hi, you don't know me. I work in finance. I heard through the grapevine what happened with your compliance form. I'm in a similar situation. My supervisor wants me to reclassify some expenses to make our budget look better. It's not technically illegal, but it's definitely misleading. I've been losing sleep over it. How did you know it was worth it? How did you find the courage to say no when everyone was saying yes? I know this is random, but I didn't know who else to ask. Marcus. You stared at the screen. Marcus. You didn't know him. Didn't know his face, his department, his story. But you knew his fear. You'd tasted it, lived in it, walked through fire because of it. Your fingers hovered over the keyboard. A few months ago, you wouldn't have known how to answer, would have felt unqualified or worse, would have given some sanitized Sunday school answer that sounded good but carried no weight. But now you knew what to say because you'd lived it. Hi, Marcus. I won't pretend I had courage. Mostly I had terror and a stubborn refusal to become someone I'd hate. Here's what helped me. Pre-decide your line before the pressure hits. Write down what you won't compromise on. When the ask comes, you're not making a decision in the moment. You're honoring a decision you already made. Document everything. Request policy in writing. Offer truthful alternatives if possible, and find one person who values integrity more than outcomes, someone you can call at 2 a.m. when you're second-guessing everything. You're not alone in this, even when it feels like you are. If you need to talk it through, my door's open. Your name. You hit send, leaned back in your chair, stared at the ceiling tiles, and felt it. The thing you'd been moving toward without naming it. Purpose. Not the grand TED Talk kind, the quiet, lived kind. The furnace hadn't just refined you, it had prepared you. Prepared you to be the person someone else could reach out to when they were standing where you'd stood. Prepared you to say, I know what that fear tastes like, and here's how you walk through it with the authority that only comes from having walked it yourself. Wounded healer. The phrase dropped into your mind like a stone into still water, ripples spreading. You'd been wounded. The fire had hurt, but the wound had become a doorway, a way to reach people you couldn't have reached if everything had been easy. That afternoon, Diane stopped by your desk. The woman from the break room who'd become something like a mentor, or maybe a friend, or maybe both. Coffee? She asked. You grabbed your mug, the one with the chipped handle you kept meaning to replace but never did, and followed her. In the break room, she poured 2 cups and gestured to the small table by the window. You sat. I wanted to tell you something, she said. The discrepancy I reported, the one I'd been covering for my manager. Yeah? HR finished the investigation. Turns out it was part of a bigger pattern. My manager was systematically misreporting project costs to inflate his department's performance. He's being let go. Your eyes widened. Diane, I know. She wrapped her hands around her mug. Part of me feels guilty. He has kids, a mortgage, but another part of me, the part that's been carrying his lies for 3 years, feels free. She met your eyes. I did the right thing. It cost him, but it freed me. And maybe it protects the next person who would have been asked to cover for him. How did it feel when you submitted the report? She smiled, sad and bright at the same time. Terrifying and clean, like I'd washed something off I didn't know was there. She paused. You know what's wild? I've been a Christian my whole life. Grew up in church, can quote scripture. But I didn't really understand what faithfulness cost until I watched you stand. You made it real for me. Your throat tightened. I'm not trying to make you uncomfortable, she continued. I needed you to know. Your obedience gave me permission for mine. That's how this works, I think. One person stands. Others see it's possible. Then they stand. And slowly, the kingdom advances. Not through programs or sermons. Through regular people in break rooms and conference rooms choosing truth when lies would be easier. You went home that night and couldn't shake the conversation. Your obedience gave me permission for mine. You'd never thought of it that way, never considered that standing wasn't just personal, it was communal, that your refusal to bend gave someone else the courage to straighten. That faithfulness was contagious in the best possible way. You thought about Marcus in finance, awake at night over reclassified expenses. Thought about Diane, carrying her manager's lies for 3 years. Thought about Sam, learning he could say no. Thought about all the people you'd never meet who might hear the story secondhand and think, if they could stand, maybe I can too. And you realized, this was the point, not the rescue, not the vindication, not even the personal refinement. This, the multiplication, the ripple effect of one person deciding their integrity matters more than their comfort, and that decision echoing into rooms you'll never enter, conversations you'll never hear, lives you'll never know you touched. Sunday morning, you went to church again, becoming a habit now, the kind that felt less like duty and more like thirst. The sermon was on, of all things, Daniel 3. You almost laughed. Of course it was. The pastor, an older man with kind eyes and a voice that carried weight without shouting, walked through the passage slowly. The golden image, the command to bow, the 3 men who refused, the furnace heated 7 times hotter. But then he said something that made you sit forward. We focus on the miracle, the 4th man in the fire, the rescue, the promotion at the end. But what if the real miracle was the standing? What if God's primary work wasn't preventing the fire but forging men who would walk into it rather than bow? What if the point wasn't deliverance but character? The kind of character that values obedience more than outcomes. He paused, let the silence sit. Because here's what I want you to hear. Most of you will never face a literal furnace. But all of you will face moments where compromise is easier than integrity. Where bending would solve the immediate problem, and standing would cost you something precious. And in those moments, the question isn't, will God rescue me? The question is, who am I becoming? Your eyes burned. The furnace doesn't make you. It reveals you. And the fourth man doesn't show up to prevent the fire. He shows up to walk through it with you so the fire refines instead of destroys. After the service, you sat in your car for a long time, just thinking, who am I becoming? 3 months ago, you'd been someone who bent when pressed. Someone who carried the weight of old compromises like stones in your pockets. Someone who valued approval more than integrity because approval felt safer. Now you were someone who knew what the fire felt like, who knew what it meant to stand when everyone else was sitting, who carried the quiet confidence that comes from being tested and not breaking. You were becoming a truth teller, not the obnoxious kind, the steady kind. The kind people could trust because you'd proven you wouldn't lie to make their lives easier. The kind who made space for others to tell the truth because you'd gone first. And more than that, you were becoming someone who believed God was real. Not theoretically, not doctrinally, experientially, because you'd met him in the fire, you'd heard his whisper in the 2 a.m. wrestling, you'd felt his presence in the conference room when you thought you were alone, you'd watched him walk you through the furnace and bring you out without the smell of smoke. You knew him now in a way you'd never known him before. And that knowledge, that bone-deep, tested-in-fire certainty, changed everything. Monday evening you were home making dinner, nothing fancy, just pasta and whatever vegetables were still good in the fridge, when your phone rang. Unknown number. You almost didn't answer, but something made you pick up. Hello? Hi, is this your name? A woman's voice, young, nervous. Yes? You don't know me. My name is Rachel. She paused, gathering courage. I got your name from Marcus in finance. He said you helped him figure out how to handle a situation at work. I'm in a similar spot and I don't know what to do. Your hand tightened on the phone. Tell me. She did. A different department, a different scenario, but the same core question. Do I bend or do I stand? You listened. Let her talk. Didn't interrupt. When she finished, you could hear her breathing on the other end, waiting, and you realized this was the mission, not grand, not platform level, just one person in a valley calling someone who'd walked through it and made it to the other side. Rachel, you said quietly, I'm going to tell you what I wish someone had told me. You're not crazy for thinking this matters. You're not naive for wanting to do the right thing. And you're not alone, even though it feels like you are. You told her your story, not all of it, just the parts that mattered. The form, the fear, the meeting, the fire, the fourth man. When you finished, she was quiet. Then, did you ever regret it? Standing? Yeah. You thought about that, really thought. No, you said finally. I regretted the cost. I regretted the fear. I regretted how hard it was. But I never regretted standing. Because the alternative was becoming someone I couldn't live with. And that cost is always higher. What if I lose my job? Then you lose a job. But you keep yourself. And in 5 years you won't remember the job title. But you'll remember who you were in the moment that mattered. She exhaled shakily. Okay. I think I know what I need to do. Do you have someone you can call when it gets hard? Someone who values truth more than outcomes? I have my sister. She's like that. Call her. Tonight. Tell her what you're facing. Let her remind you who you are when the pressure tries to tell you otherwise. Thank you, Rachel whispered. Seriously, thank you. You hung up and stood in your kitchen, pasta water boiling over on the stove, and felt something settle in your chest. This was the point. Not fame, not platform, not recognition, just one person helping another person walk through fire. Wounded healer. That night, you pulled out a notebook, the one you'd started keeping after the furnace. where you wrote things you didn't want to forget. You flipped to a clean page and wrote, "Things I want to remember when the next fire comes." Because there will be a next fire. There's always a next fire. 1. Pre-decide your lines. Write down what you won't compromise on before pressure arrives. When the moment comes, you're not deciding. You're obeying a decision already made. 2. Document everything. Request policy in writing. Take contemporaneous notes. Protect yourself not with lies, but with paper trails that speak truth. 3. Offer truthful alternatives. Integrity doesn't mean being inflexible. It means being unmovable on truth while staying creative on methods. 4. Find your Diane. One person who values integrity more than outcomes. One voice that will remind you who you are when the pressure tries to redefine you. 5. Remember, faithfulness is success. The world measures outcomes. God measures obedience. They're not the same metric. Trust the right one. 6. The fourth man is real. You are never alone in the fire. Even when it feels like abandonment, it's companionship. He walks in, he stays, he brings you through. 7. The smell doesn't have to stay. The fire reveals, it doesn't define. Let it refine you without letting it mark you. Bitterness is optional. So is cynicism. Choose peace. 8. Your obedience gives others permission. Someone is watching. Someone needs to see it's possible to stand. Your faithfulness ripples into rooms you'll never enter. 9. Integrity compounds. Every small stand builds the foundation for the next one. You're not starting from zero each time. You're building on bedrock. 10. But if not, the secret isn't confidence in rescue. It's confidence in God's worthiness regardless of rescue. Obey because He's worthy. Trust Him with the outcome. You read it back. Added one more. 11. The cost is real, but so is the peace. Standing will cost you something, maybe everything. But keeping your soul is worth more than any price you'll pay to lose it. The weeks continued. Work continued. Life continued. But you were awake in it now in a way you hadn't been before. You noticed the small compromises people made. The little lies in meetings, the blame shifting, the credit stealing, the truth bending. You'd made them too once. But now you saw them clearly. And seeing them meant you couldn't participate without feeling the nausea. So you didn't. Not in a loud way, not in a self-righteous way. Just consistently. When someone tried to shift blame in a meeting, you quietly corrected the record. When a project status got exaggerated to make the team look better, you added the context that made it accurate. When someone asked you to sign off on something you hadn't verified, you said, "Let me review it first," and actually did. Small things, ordinary things, but small things build empires. Or tear them down. And slowly, so slowly you almost didn't see it, the culture around you shifted. People started being more careful with truth, more precise with claims, more honest about timelines, not because you preached, because you practiced. And practice is always louder than preaching. 4 months after the furnace, you got an email from Patricia. Subject line, opportunity. Your stomach clenched. Opportunity in corporate speak could mean anything. You opened it. "Hi, your name. I wanted to reach out personally. We're creating a new role, Compliance Integrity Liaison, someone who works across departments to ensure our reporting standards are accurate and policy adherent. It's a lateral move in terms of title, but it comes with a pay increase and high visibility with leadership. Given your demonstrated commitment to accuracy and your ability to navigate difficult situations with professionalism, I think you'd be a strong fit." Interested in discussing? Patricia. You read it twice. The job born from the fire that almost consumed you. The role created because you stood. The opportunity that wouldn't exist if you'd bent. You sat back, and for a moment you let yourself feel it. Not pride, exactly. More like awe, because this was Daniel 3:30 playing out in real time. Then the king promoted Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego in the province of Babylon. Not despite the furnace, because of it. Not around the test, through it. You replied, "Yes, let's talk." That Friday, you met Rachel for coffee. She'd reached out a week after your phone call to say she'd stood, submitted the accurate report, faced the pushback, walked through her own smaller furnace, and survived. Now she sat across from you at a coffee shop near your office, hands wrapped around a latte, eyes bright with the particular clarity that comes after you've been tested and didn't break. "I wanted to thank you in person," she said, "for picking up when I called, for telling me your story, for making me believe it was possible. How did it turn out?" She smiled. They weren't happy. There was a week of silence that felt like punishment. But then they reviewed my concerns, found I was right, and adjusted the project scope. My manager apologized. Kind of. In that corporate non-apology way. "But you're still there. I'm still there. And more importantly," she leaned forward, voice dropping, "I'm still me. I didn't trade myself for approval, and I can't tell you how good that feels." You left the coffee shop and walked back to your office, the late afternoon sun slanting golden through the buildings, the city noise humming its ordinary song. And you thought about the past 4 months, the archaeology of it, the compliance form that started it all. The break room conversation with a manager who didn't know he was building a furnace, the 2 a.m. wrestling with God in your kitchen, the conference room where you said no and meant it, the email from Patricia that could have been a termination but turned into validation, the quiet woman named Diane who'd stood with you, the finance worker named Marcus who'd needed permission, the young woman named Rachel who'd needed a roadmap, the sermon on Daniel that landed exactly when you needed it, the new role that wouldn't exist if you'd compromised. All of it, the hand of God, not controlling, not puppeteering, redeeming, taking your obedience and multiplying it into something bigger than you could have orchestrated, taking your small stand and rippling it into rooms you'd never enter, taking your refusal to bow and using it to give others permission to stand. That night, you sat at your kitchen table one last time under the warm lamplight, the table that had become sacred ground, the place where you'd wrestled and surrendered and been refined. You opened your Bible to Daniel 3 and read the ending again, but this time you weren't looking for new information. You were looking for companionship, for the reminder that you weren't the first person to walk this path and wouldn't be the last. Daniel 3:28-30. Then Nebuchadnezzar spake, and said, Blessed be the God of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, who hath sent his angel, and delivered his servants that trusted in him, and have changed the king's word, and yielded their bodies, that they might not serve nor worship any god, except their own God. Therefore I make a decree, that every people, nation, and language, which speak anything amiss against the God of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, shall be cut in pieces, and their houses shall be made a dunghill, because there is no other God that can deliver after this sort. Then the king promoted Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego in the province of Babylon. Their obedience became a testimony. Their stand changed the king's decree. Their faithfulness led to promotion, not because they were perfect, because they were present in their integrity, present in their refusal, present in the fire, and God met presence with presence. You closed the Bible and sat in the quiet, and this time you didn't pray with words, you just sat, in the lamplight, in the peace, in the gratitude, and the presence you'd learned to recognize, the fourth man, the one who walks into furnaces, the whisper that had carried you through, settled around you like a blanket, not speaking, not needing to, just there, the way he'd always been there, the way he'd always be there. And in that sacred, ordinary moment, no thunder, no angels, no dramatic revelation, you understood. This was the victory, not the new job, not the vindication, not even the ripple effect of your obedience into other lives. This, knowing him, not about him, not theologically, not at a distance, knowing him. The way you know someone who's walked beside you through hell and didn't leave. The way you know someone who's proven their faithfulness when yours was costly. The way you know someone who's been the fourth man in every fire you've ever faced and ever will face. That knowledge, that tested, refined, furnace-forged certainty, was worth every cost. 3 anchors. You pulled out your notebook one last time and wrote them down, not for yourself, but for the next person who'd need them. The next Marcus, the next Rachel, the next version of yourself standing in a break room with a choice. Promise. KJV. But if not, be it known unto thee, O King, that we will not serve thy gods, nor worship the golden image which thou hast set up. Daniel 3:18. God honors unwavering hearts. Your obedience is never wasted, even when outcomes are unclear. Stand because he's worthy, not because rescue is guaranteed. Practice, this week. Pre-decide. Write down 3 non-negotiables, things you will not compromise on, no matter the cost. Keep them visible. Document. If you're in a pressure situation, request policy in writing. Take contemporaneous notes. Anchor in truth, not arguments. Offer alternatives. Integrity isn't rigidity. Be unmovable on truth while staying creative on methods. I can't do that, but I can do this. Find your ally. Identify one person who values integrity more than outcomes. Someone you can call at 2 a.m. when doubt is loudest. Perspective. Long view. Favor is good. Faithfulness is better. Favor can be withdrawn. Promotions can be rescinded. Approval can evaporate. But faithfulness compounds. It builds a foundation no furnace can burn. It creates character that weathers every storm. It forges a relationship with God that's tested and true. Win the small battles, they decide the war. Purpose echo. You leaned back. Let the final synthesis settle. Integrity is costly in the moment and priceless over a lifetime. That was the thesis you'd started with. The truth you'd tested in fire. And now, 4 months later, you could say it with the authority of someone who'd paid the price and found it worth every penny. Integrity isn't one heroic stand. It's 100 micro-decisions that shape who you become when no one's watching. It's the small refusal in a break room that becomes the bedrock for the big stand in a conference room. It's the 2 a.m. wrestling that forges the clarity for the 8 a.m. meeting. It's the choice to keep your soul even when keeping your job is uncertain. It's the willingness to walk into fire because you trust the one who walks in with you more than you fear the flames. One-line life application. Win the small battles. They decide the war. Because the compliance form wasn't really about compliance, the furnace wasn't really about gold images, the stand wasn't really about a job, it was about who you were becoming. And every small choice, every moment where you chose truth over ease, integrity over approval, obedience over outcome, was a brick in the foundation of that person. The person who can be trusted, the person who won't bend, the person who walks into furnaces because they know who walks in with them. That person is worth every fire. Prayer. You spoke it aloud into the lamplight. Lord, give me a steady heart when the furnace is loud. Make truth my habit and peace my proof. Help me pre-decide so pressure doesn't define me. When I stand, alone, afraid, uncertain, remind me, I am never alone. You are the fourth man in the fire. You walk in, you stay, you bring me through. Let my obedience give others permission. Let my faithfulness ripple into rooms I'll never see. And when the next fire comes, because it will come, let me walk in without hesitation, trusting not in rescue, but in your worthiness, whatever it costs. Amen. Benediction. You stood, turned off the lamp, let the darkness settle for just a moment before the city lights filtered through your window, and you whispered the words you'd carry forward. Go in quiet courage and honest words. Your integrity is not up for debate. Your faithfulness is already success. The fire has no power over you because the fourth man walks with you. Stand when it costs. Speak when it's hard. Trust when it's dark. You are not alone. You have never been alone. You will never be alone. But if not, we still won't bow. And somewhere, in the sacred ordinary of a Tuesday morning, in a break room conversation with a stranger, in an email from someone you'll never meet, in the quiet testimony of a life lived with integrity, the furnace keeps refining, the fourth man keeps walking, and the faithful keep standing, one small choice at a time, one fire at a time, one but if not at a time, until the kingdom comes and every furnace is finally forever cold.